Today I'm going to explain a film called 4x4 from 2019. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care, and I hope you enjoy it. In the start of the movie, we're shown a neighborhood. The security of that neighborhood is very tight. Every house has its own cameras, fences, and barbed wires. This is because theft and robberies are very common in that neighborhood. But all this stuff still can't stop it, and the police also don't have any control over the criminals. These criminals are not afraid of the police. They even rob people in broad daylight. Then we see a man named Suryo, who is also a thief, and while walking along the road, Suryo sees a 4x4 car. He comes close to the car and starts messing with it. His goal is to steal the central control system of the car. For that, he very cleverly opens the lock of the car. He uses a tennis ball to open it, and he opens it very easily. Then he gets inside the car and closes the door. He then takes out the central control/stereo of the car. From this, we get the idea that he was after the stereo rather than the whole car. And after taking it out, he puts it inside his bag. But he doesn't stop there. Instead of fleeing, he starts to mess around in the car. He even pees on the back seat of the car. From his actions, we know the situation of the neighborhood. He doesn't fear anyone, nor the police or the owner of the car. Then we see after messing around for a while, he finally decides to leave the car. But when he tries to open the door, he gets surprised because the car doors were already locked. He did not panic and he tried several times, but still he was not able to open it. Finally, he decides to break the glass of the car. For that, he takes out a hammer from his bag and tries to smash the windows. But to his surprise, the glass was bulletproof, and he can't even manage to put a scratch on the glass. Then he tries this several times on different glasses of the car, including the windshield, but still he fails. He tries to hit on the other side of the car, but still it was of no use. Then he decides that if he can't break the glass, he would break the whole door. For this, he gets on the back seat of the car and starts to tear the door apart. This thing also doesn't help, and instead of breaking the door, he ends up hurting his arm. He hurts it quite badly, as after getting injured, his arm starts to bleed. Now he has no other options left, so he takes out his gun from his bag and shoots at the window of the car. But as the glass was bulletproof, the bullet bounces back and instead of breaking the glass, ends up injuring Suryo's leg. Now Suryo's leg was bleeding very badly, and in order to stop the bleeding, he takes off his shirt and wraps it around his wound tightly so that the bleeding would stop. After this, he tries to call his wife to tell her his situation. But his luck is the worst, because when he tries to call his wife, his phone runs out of battery, and now he's totally trapped inside the car. We think that he would ask for help from the people, but he was not able to do so because the windows of the car were polarized, meaning they were tinted black, and only the person who is inside the car can see what's going on outside of the car, but the people from outside can't see anything inside. Now, as he was trapped, he had no other option but to wait for the owner of the car to arrive. But the things don't go according to plan, and after waiting for several hours, the night falls, and Suryo falls asleep in the car. But even in the morning when he wakes up, he sees that the owner of the car hasn't arrived even then, as if he didn't care for the car. As Suryo hasn't eaten or drank anything, he knows that he has to do something, and he has to do it soon, otherwise he thinks that this car will become his grave. Then he puts back the stereo and plugs in the wires. Then he turns it on and starts to listen to music just to calm his mind. Then he again tries to break the glass, but still in vain. Then we see that a call comes on the stereo, and Suryo quickly answers it. On the other side of the call, it's the owner, whose name was Henry and who is a doctor. He tells Suryo that he knows that Suryo was trapped inside the car. He also knows how he got in the car and why he got in the car. But the surprising thing was that the owner of the car was not in any kind of tension. Instead, he tells Suryo that he should be the one who should be in tension. He tells him that he has been robbed 28 times before, so that's why he bought this car. He tells him that when you were trying to steal the stereo of the car, you triggered a security lock, because of which the car was completely locked, and now he can't get out, because the car is bulletproof, soundproof, and its windows are completely tinted black. Suryo gets angry after listening to this, and he shouts at Henry. This was his biggest mistake, because Henry was able to control the car from his phone, and right after Suryo shouts at Henry, he cuts the call and then switches the AC on to its maximum setting. Soon the temperature of the car drops down, and Suryo tries to cover the AC vents. He takes the foot mats and he places them over the vents, but it's still not enough. To escape the cold, Suryo unties his shirt and wears it, and then he rips his jeans a little, and with that he ties his wound. Suryo was being tortured there, and the level of cold in the car can be seen clearly from his face. It was looking like he will freeze soon. Then we see that Henry turns off the AC, and Suryo takes a deep breath of relief. Henry again calls him, and now he asks him a question. He says, "What would you do if your son was caught stealing?" He asks him this because he knows that Cirio has a son, and Henry also tells him that if he answers this question correctly, he will also give Cirio water to drink. Cirio answers that if his son was caught stealing, he would take him to the police and would hand him over to them. Henry replies that it's the wrong answer, because no policeman or any judge can stop him from doing this again. And he says that the one who would be able to stop him would be you, and you would have to set an example for him. And we all know what example Cirio set up for his son by doing crimes. We also get the idea that Henry is fed up with criminals and the police. It's also natural because he's been robbed 28 times and no one did anything. And the criminals of that had no fear, and the example is in front of us, Cirio. He was not afraid when he tried to steal. Instead, he messed around in the car like it was nothing. And because Cirio gave the wrong answer, Henry doesn't give him water, and he ends the call. Cirio, who had lost all hope and was suffering in this hell, gives up and starts to look outside of the window. Because of his answer, he wasn't given any freedom or water, and now all he could do was to wait for someone to help him. A short while later, he sees a police car stopping in front of the car, and a policeman comes close to the car in which Cirio was locked. He gets a little bit of hope that maybe this police officer will help him in some way, as he was inspecting the car very thoroughly. But his hope soon shatters when the policeman writes a ticket and places it on the windscreen of the car and then leaves. This ticket was for the black tinted mirrors of the car. Soon it starts to rain, and the irony in this was that Cirio was suffering because of thirst inside the car, and outside it was raining. Then Henry calls again, and this time asks for Cirio's full name and his ID number. Cirio tells him everything honestly this time, on which Henry gives him water, but this water was for the washing of the car, and it was not for drinking, because it will damage people's health. Cirio, who has no other options, drinks the water, even knowing its effects. Then, on the next day, Henry calls again, and this time Cirio tells him that he was hungry and thirsty, and he was also shot. He told Henry this because he thought that maybe because Henry was a doctor, he would take pity on him and would help him. But Henry, instead of helping Cirio, turns on the heater of the car. The temperature of the car goes up so high that Cirio had to undress completely to escape the heat. After a while, Henry turns off the heaters, and Cirio dresses himself. Then he finds the manual of the car and reads it. He thinks that he might get something useful from it, but he finds nothing. In the end, he starts to eat the pages of the book. He does so because he was hungry, and the only thing that he could have eaten was this manual. As he eats the papers, the thirst starts to increase as well. It becomes unbearable, and now Cirio only had one option left. He pees inside a bottle and drinks it. Then we see another thief who comes there and he tries to open the car. Cirio sees this and thinks maybe he would be able to open the door of the car. But the luck of the thief was not so good, or I should say not so bad, because he was caught by the people and they started beating him up, and then they handed him over to the police. From this we get the idea why Henry was so angry at these people. The situation in this neighborhood is really the worst. Now we get to know that Cirio was not only a robber, he had also killed many people before, and the police and the government didn't punish him. Instead, he was roaming on the streets freely, and we also get to know that Henry was looking for such a person to make an example out of him, and the opportunity soon came to him. The next day, Henry calls Cirio again, but now Cirio has no strength to say anything. But Henry still doesn't give Cirio freedom. He tells him that today he went to Cirio's house and he gave his family $100,000. He further said that he told Cirio's family that Cirio won this money from the lottery. Henry was in a good mood today, so he gives chocolate to Cirio to eat. The chocolate was hidden inside the car, and then he ends the phone call. Cirio gets some of his strength back, and as the call ends, Cirio tries again to break free from the car. He ends up making a scratch in the car's body, but it was still not enough to attract people towards him, and he also couldn't shout because he had no strength. In the night, we see Cirio, who is pressing the ignition button again and again, just to pass the time, because he had nothing else to do. The car somehow started, and Cirio found this a great opportunity. But soon he saw that the car was in reverse, and the gear shifter was also locked. He comes up with a plan, and he drives the car in reverse, and crashes it, because of which the back window of the car breaks, and he gets out. He was finally free. He then goes to a restaurant and eats a lot of food because he hasn't eaten for days. But the food is not free, and when a guard comes over to ask him for money, Cirio doesn't have it, and in order to flee, he shoots the guard. He wakes up and finds himself inside the car. This was all a dream. His situation was so bad that he dreams of things like this. Then he gets a call from Henry the next day, And Cirillo tells him that he couldn't bear it any longer, so he decides to kill himself and points his gun to his face, but he couldn't shoot. At night, Henry comes to visit him, and we see Henry for the first time. He gets inside the car and he takes the gun from Cirillo's hand, and he puts it on the dashboard. He starts talking to him, and while talking, Henry receives a phone call, and when he answers it, Cirillo takes the chance and shoots Henry. Then he gets out of the car, but he was so weak that he was not able to get away from there, so he starts shooting in the air. He does this because he thought maybe someone will come out of his house to look and would help him, but no one comes. Then we see Henry comes there. He was not dead because the bullet only touched his face and he survived. He drags Cirillo back into the car, but this time the police arrive. They arrived there because of the gunfire that Cirillo had made a little while ago. The police try to stop him, but Henry points the gun to Cirillo's head and tells them this was their personal matter and they should stay out of this. As the time goes by, we see a huge crowd of people gather, and they all start giving their views. The police tell Henry that no matter what, Cirillo is still a human being, and even if he kills Cirillo, nothing will change. The people who were present there also started giving their views, some saying that he should kill Cirillo, while others tell him to let him go. Henry also knew what would happen to him if he killed Cirillo, so he thinks of something, and then he lets him go. After letting Cirillo go, Henry gets back in his car and closes the door. Then he blows up the car while he's sitting inside it. The police take Cirillo into custody, and on the next day we see that everything goes back to normal, and Cirillo was being released after a few hours. Now we know why Henry did this. He was robbed 28 times before, and this was the 29th attempt, and still Cirillo got out and was once again free. Even though he robbed many people and was a killer, he was still not punished for his crimes. Why Henry killed himself, or why he let a man like Cirillo go, is a mystery, because Henry already knew that the police would let him go. The arrogance of the police and the government forced him to take such drastic decisions. Even though he was a doctor, he ended up like this. On this shocking twist, the movie ends. To watch more explanations of these kinds of movies, click on the videos on your screen, and don't forget to let me know how you feel about today's video in the comments down below.